Then we have Bryce Marden. Now, Marden studies at Yale, and he develops a formal strategy that characterized his paintings of the following decades. This preoccupation with rectangular formats and the repeated use of muted, extremely individualized palettes. He has described his early work as highly emotional and subjective, despite their apparent lack of any referential material. And from 1969 to 74, he will work as a painting instructor at the School of Visual Arts in New York. After that, in the mid-80s, he turns away from minimalism towards gestural abstraction. Around this time, he traveled to Thailand, where he became interested in Far Eastern calligraphy and the art of the brushstroke. His more recent large-scale paintings continue to employ glyphs inspired by Asian characters. And the piece we're looking at, the first piece we're looking at, is actually the Dylan painting. This is one of his early, very minimalist, monochromatic works. Now, the Dylan painting is a large monochrome rectangle of a hue best described as maybe plum gray or any number of other possible colors. I mean, after all, we all know there are 50 shades of gray to choose from. Its surface is broken only by a sliver of blank canvas at the bottom. This is flecked by drips from the painting done above. For Marden, the difficulties in making these very dissimilar pieces was not so different. He says you don't know what you're really after or what you're going to get in either mode of work. There's always some sort of unknown, even with monochrome. In the Dylan painting, he's trying to find the right color for the shape he was using. In dimensions, it's a double square, so he wanted to avoid having it look simply like two squares. The significant difference, he thinks, is in how his early paintings and more recent ones were put together. In the monochrome, the first layer went on, and every successive layer pushes that first one back. Kind of altering it just slightly. Even if you have the perfect color, it will alter slightly every time you apply it, even if it's the same every time. In most of his works since the 80s, the first thing that goes on is what's in front and everything else goes behind. So here, in his early works, he's kind of pushing the initial layers back. In his later works, he's pushing forward. So as we look at the Dylan painting, how do we deal with this? After all, this is almost a perfectly monochrome rectangle. So do we deal with it like a Rothko? How do we handle it? Well, first of all, you're looking at composition. What choices did he make? Well, he had to make the choice of the size of the canvas, which is quite large. He has to make the choice of leaving the bottom edge slightly unfinished. He's giving us little bits to work with. He's also giving us a title, the Dylan painting. Well, Dylan could be a specific person, it could be a celebrity, it could be Bob Dylan. So how does that work in? You could read into it in terms of the color, or at a more basic level, you could read into it and say, is it art? And it only refers to itself. It is completely universal. It's simply a color. It's very similar to what Rothko will do at the Rothko Chapel just a couple years after this. So Marden is just before Rothko does the Rothko Chapel. So at the end of the day, you could look at it as abstract expressionism to some degree, although we don't have the brush marks that we have from Rothko. You could instead focus on the conversations that it brings up and look at it as a more conceptual piece. Either way, you're kind of reading into yourself. He's asking you to make a judgment about the piece once again, and when you make that judgment, to ask yourself why you're making it.